was always me taking the kids to school in public transportation. I always felt the preemptive annoyance of the people behind me in line, like, oh boy, this is going to take all day. And then it never would, because I would be like, ship with the stroller and snip with the Metro card and bing, bang, boom, and sit down. And like I had it down. And I wanted somebody to tell me I was doing a good job, which of course never happened.
Yep.
Or I wanted somebody to say, let me help you. But I did not seem like somebody who needed help. I seemed like somebody supremely in charge. But you're sort of acting out, look how good I am at this. Won't someone help me? And it doesn't work. It doesn't work very well. If you seem good at it, then you seem good at it.
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of The Terri Cole Show. I had a fascinating conversation in this episode with Amy Wilson, who is the author of a memoir called When Did I Get Like This? And her latest book, which is what we talked about on this interview, Happy to Help. Since 2016, she's been the co-host of the Webby-honored podcast, What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. She is also an actor, and she's appeared on Broadway and series regulars on sitcoms, so she's actually really funny. But the book I really loved because it's Happy to Help, Adventures of a People Pleaser, and it's essays. And so talk about being a high-functioning codependent, but doing it with lots and lots of humor. So if you could use a good read, I think you are going to love this book and love this conversation that I had with Amy Wilson. Enjoy. I'm so excited to welcome Amy Wilson to the Terri Cole Show. Hi, Amy. Welcome.
Hi, Terri. Thank you for having me.
You guys who are not looking at YouTube can't see that I'm holding her gorgeous book up. She has a new book out called Happy to Help, Adventures of a People Pleaser, Essays by Amy Wilson. Wow, so much to talk about. So much of our work is so the same. It's like theory-wise, it's great. So.
Right. I think so. Although I'm more, if you're the professional offering advice, I'm more the how not to. Don't do it like I did.
I love it though. Yours though is really color commentary. And so many great examples. So anyway, I love the essay format. I love this book. You guys are going to love it. It's available everywhere right now, is it not?
Yes, it is. It's out today.
Right on. I love it. Okay, so let's start from the top.
Okay.
You have actually, it's funny, looking back at your career and all the things that you've done so many different things. So do me a favor. Let's say you were like a Marvel movie character. Like we've all got an origin story with where we end up. So tell us a little bit about your origin story.
So I grew up going to Catholic school, very much an overachiever, doobie, brownie, class president, valedictorian, Tracy Flick sort of person, if you know that movie. And also an oldest sister, an oldest of 6 kids. And my mom is the oldest of 8. And so I talk about that in the book. There must be something that accrues to the oldest of an oldest. So even as I grew up being this mini overachiever, I also had younger brothers and sisters to take care of every day. Sort of whenever I was around, there was something to do. And I very much loved doing that and loved being a helper, and definitely folded that into my sense of self. After college, acted for a while, which was a childhood dream of mine that I just never changed my mind about. I had success, did Broadway, did television, then became a parent, and moved into creating content about parenting, since that was the life I was living. Wrote a parenting book, and then have been doing a parenting podcast called What Fresh Hell since 2016. And now this second book. And so I was always sort of like a writer, content creator about the stuff that I'm interested in, which is women's lives and being funny, but also thought-provoking. That's always my goal.
Yes. So, and specifically with your acting, it was like improv. And so it was funny stuff that you were doing, which of course translates into the essays in this book and the other things that you do in the pod that you've had for so long. So your pod since 2016?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep, and I have this pod since 2015.
Wow. Yeah. It's exciting. It's a real privilege, isn't it? To be able to talk to interesting people. And I really loved it.
Me too. It's the best. Because what you're interested in, of course, you're bringing people on who you're interested in on your show. So I also think that the whole thing about parenting and coming from a point of view where the way that you write, we feel very seen and included. And like, your stuff is very accessible. Let's start with the essays in the book. basically explore how women in particular, we are conditioned to be helpers.
That's right.
In society.
Yes.
So for you, when did that first start happening in life?
Oh, I mean, very early because like I said, I was the oldest of three by the time I was 7, and I was changing diapers and feeding my baby brother his Gerbers, and again, not something I seethed with resentment about. When I hear the term people pleaser, that's sort of freighted with this like, and all the while you're like, if only people could know my real thoughts, which are I'm resenting every moment of this, and if that is the reality, then you definitely need to change what you're doing. I think I drew a lot of self-identity from being the sort of protagonist who can make any situation better, and I'm just going to try harder, and I don't give up. And there were times in my life when that stick-to-itiveness really served me, and there were other times when I stayed too long and tried too hard and didn't regard the extremely clear signs that something that it was time to give up on something or make a change. And I didn't give myself that capability because that would be admitting failure in my head.
Yes, there's something at one of the these boundary boss bill of rights teaching people to have boundaries, but one of them is you have the right to change your mind, to make mistakes, to course correct, and to change your mind. Because I feel like when you are a high functioning, some perfectionist, recovering perfectionist, whatever you want to call it, it's really hard to give yourself permission to just change your mind, to be like, and I was also that person who held on to relationships like super way longer, way past the expiration date of sometimes friendships, definitely romantic relationships, because it was so painful. But there's something about being too loyal or loyal for too long, sort of for the wrong reasons, at least in my own experience. And I felt very identified with what you were sort of writing about that, where giving yourself permission to go, hey, this isn't working. You know,
Right.
it's time to move on. But it's so interesting how we both have had podcasts for a really long time.
Right.
Where you're just keep coming back, though, and doing it. You did some research that I found really interesting. Actually, you explored the research that was out there around multitasking, because I've always been super fascinated with this. I talk about it quite a bit. So from what you've gleaned, is it true that women's brains are more suited for multitasking than men's? Curious.
No, it turns out that despite everything I thought from reading a few headlines in the 90s and the early 2000s, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, that no, actually, our brains are actually no more suited to multitasking than men's. We're just doing 2 and 3 things at a time, and struggling with it just as much as anybody else would, while accepting this idea that we are better at it, that we can't ask anybody else to do 14 things at once because only we are uniquely suited to do it. No, we're not. We're not suited to do it either.
And what an interesting sort of package to be sold, right? Because that's part of it too. It's like, oh, but you're so much better at these things.
Right.
Yeah, like changing dirty diapers, like I'm better at what? But I do think that there's something about, well, women are so much better at the nurturing and at the, and I agree with you. Obviously the research is the research, but also I married a widower. And so in meeting a man who had raised children by himself for 12 years before I got there, you know, I was always so amazed at, I would say to my friends, like, this guy can get a stain out of my sweater, makes sure I have water in my back. Like, literally, he was like a man, but it was like in some ways he had the thoughtfulness and the multitaskiness of a woman because he was doing it all by himself for such a long period of time.
Because the situation demanded it, right?
Correct.
That he had to learn these things. And so, miracle of miracles, right, he could also use the stain stick on the shirt.
Yes. So you guys, you and Margaret, is it that you have the podcast?
My co-host,
with?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about, because I know you guys are also touring with the pod, and this is very interesting to me because I look at podcasts now and I'm like, they're what daytime TV used to be. Right? Think about daytime TV. We don't have the Mike Douglases or the Merv Griffins or that's not here. But you're here and you guys are doing it. So what has been your experience with sort of actually interfacing in real life with people who are fans of the pod?
It is the best thing about it. We're doing some different events to promote the launch of this book, separate from the podcast. But and Margaret Abels, who has been my friend, my partner now for these 8 years, she's driving to Boston with me, and she's going to interview me. And so, of course, that means some people from our podcast will show up, and to meet people in real life, or even just to get Instagram messages or emails or the things we get. Like, you helped me, you were my company. It is so gratifying to hear from women that through the pandemic or through their early months nursing a colicky baby, that we were their company, that we felt like friends, and we made them feel better about themselves during this very difficult time. That's sort of the I can't think of a higher use of a platform than to make women feel like there's nothing wrong with them, that they're struggling, and that they don't need to fix themselves first. They just need to hang on or believe themselves or make a change or set a boundary or whatever it is, but don't accept that there must be some failing in yourself, that mothering doesn't come immediately, perfectly, naturally to you. It's a story. Or that you're not as good at multitasking as your sister-in-law, whatever it is.
Exactly.
Nobody is. Nobody is.
Correct. So let's talk about another thing that causes pain for women in particular, at least in my demographic, is perfectionism. So you refer to yourself as a perfectionist, and then you kind of talk about yourself as a recovering perfectionist. But now you've come to sort of reject those sort of definitions of self. Let's talk a little bit about what have you realized about perfectionism?
There are definitely times in my life that I've had perfectionistic tendencies that I apply to things. But perfectionist, people pleaser, so many of these things are things that women call themselves and men don't. And more importantly, I think they are overly assigned to women who are struggling and who show up as struggling or asking for help. For example, the whole idea of maternal gatekeeping, which is this psychologically studied supposed phenomenon, do the research on this idea that women don't let their spouses and children help, that their standards are too high. And if only they could change their high standards, that their lives would magically improve. Now, do you maybe have standards for the way your house should look that your teenage son has different standards for? Perhaps, but that doesn't mean you can never ask anybody to pick up a sock because you have to have it a certain way. I just think that's a story that's sold back to women to keep us trying to fix ourselves instead of saying, no. I'm not doing this all myself anymore. People pleasing. That's another one that I think can be overly applied to somebody who's just like, I'm struggling. This is too much. I need to put some of this down and I don't know what to do. That you've made your own bed. It's your own personality deficiencies that have made this. So fix those. It just keeps you spinning your wheels, I think. And I think I over applied the self-help in my life instead of getting out of the relationship, right? If I can just read one more self-help book about owning my worth in this relationship. No, just get a new relationship. That's what I learned, I think, a little too late.
I think the blaming, though, that you're speaking to is that if women talk about suffering, a lot of times what comes back is a certain amount of blame. Like, you brought it on yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And so this leads us to not want to talk about it or to complain about it or to try to change it. And I think that the modern life, right, we can't keep doing, I don't know, that's why I wrote my book, is we can't keep doing what we're doing. Like, to that breakneck speed, the amount of bandwidth out, the amount of, when you think about how much information we have about the people in our lives, like a stadium full of data about everybody and what they eat and don't eat and what they like and don't like. And rarely, at least in my experience as a therapist, is there an expectation that other people will know that about us. You know what I mean? And it's like this whole over-accommodating, over-functioning, over-giving, overdoing. And what really struck me as one of the stories, or I think you're opening the book with it, about, getting on the bus in New York City with toddlers, with little kids, and with, like, being so good at what you're doing that literally nobody is offering to help you.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit
Right.
about that?
Right. I used to have, so I had 3 kids under 5, and because we live in New York City, we had to take them to school in public transportation. And my husband had a job that demanded he be at work early in the morning. So it was always me taking the kids to school, including the baby, because I wasn't going to get a babysitter to take the other 2 to school. So she came with me.
Right.
So I'd have the baby in the carrier and one little boy, a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, by each hand, and we would get on the city bus. And I always felt the preemptive annoyance of the people behind me in line, like, oh boy, this is going to take all day. And then it never would, because I would be like, ship with the stroller and snip with the Metro card and bing, bang, boom, and sit down. And, like I had it
Mm-hmm.
down. And I wanted somebody to tell me I was doing a good job, which of course never
Mm-hmm.
happened.
Yep.
Or I wanted somebody to say, oh my gosh, let me get his backpack. Let me just, as the bus is
Mm-hmm.
lurching away and I don't have anybody sitting down yet, let me help
Yeah.
you. But I did not seem like somebody who needed help. I
Yep.
seemed like somebody supremely in charge of 3
Yep.
little kids. And I was most of the time. But you're sort of acting out, look how good I am at this. Won't someone help me? And
Right.
it doesn't work. It doesn't work very well. If you seem good at it, then you seem good at it.
Yes. And people then leave you to your own. But part of this whole overfunctioning and being so highly capable, there's a certain amount of resentment that can come along
Mm,
with, at least in my own experience, of just being exhausted. Like it's tiring having so much of that output. And I think that when you really look at how much mothers do, I mean, and not so much of what you talk about, not so much of, the essays in the book, but it's like, it's a lot in life. So for you, how do you refill your cup?
Well, it's a little bit easier for me, I have to say, because my kids are older now. And so I
Mm,
do have more time. It does slowly get easier when you're not actually in charge of their safety at every moment. It gets hard
totally.
in other ways when you can't at all contribute to their choices moment to moment because they're far away from you. That's hard too. Um, but I've gotten better at circling and underlining in small ways. Christmas just went past us, and there were so many presents to wrap. And as I do every year, I said, like, I'm not buying presents for everybody. I don't want any more, like, this one gives this one a sweater, and neither of you have any idea what it is or how it got there or wrapped around the tree.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing that anymore. Cut to me the
Yep.
day before Christmas doing it, so that there's presents for everybody. Um, and I'm up by myself on Christmas morning getting the presents under the tree because my kids are big and everybody's still asleep. And I did. I felt that, like, why am I doing this? Why am I the
Mm-hmm.
only one awake right now? Why am
Yep.
I? And again, it's because I have a system and I do this. And so, my loving spouse still asleep, my 3 children, safe in their awareness. There'd be lots of presents when they woke
Mm-hmm.
up. And yeah, I did feel maybe I've made progress that I feel the, like, wait a minute, this isn't fair, that I haven't really
Mm-hmm.
allowed myself to feel until writing this book.
Yep.
Um, so I kind of told everybody when they woke up. And again, I think they're not like, I get it. They're sort of baffled, when you're sort of like, I don't want to do this anymore. They're sort of like, do what? These presents, it's all magic. You just make it
Yep.
happen by magic.
Yep.
So sorry, this is a long answer, but I was coming around to saying, sort of circling, like, this isn't magic. There's
Mm-hmm.
50 presents,
Uh-huh.
48 of which I chose, bought, wrapped, and put
Wrapped.
under the tree. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank me. And now ask me if I want a cup of coffee. Like, do you want a cup of coffee?
Yeah.
Yes, I would. Would you go get me one, please?
Yes.
Show up
And
as
then
somebody who's
letting
worthy
them
of
do
that,
it,
and then
though,
let them do
right?
it. That's right. That's right. And when I hear, like, well, but I mean, I'm not very good at wrapping presents, that's fine. And so one of my kids wrapped some presents for the cousins, and they looked insane. And who cares? I
Nope.
don't care. Don't
Nope.
give me that excuse to keep doing
Mm-mm.
nothing.
Nope. Exactly. It's funny. This year, my sister, she has 3 grown kids, and every year it's like, she would do these stockings, and it was like so super thoughtful and tons of money, and like these big stockings of, like, exactly what they need and what that, but never restful. You know what I mean? And I'm a super not a, that's just not my thing. And people know, I'm like, listen, you need help buying a ticket to go somewhere, we will get that during the year, but just And keep in mind, my kids are very grown. So I have
Yeah.
grandkids. So, I mean, it's different when you have kids living in your house. But I wondered, I was like, is my sister going to crack? Because she's really like a super mom, And I'm like, is she going to really not do it? And she was like, it was 2 days before Christmas. She's like, this is the most fun Christmas season I've literally ever had. She's like, I am so excited. And interestingly enough, her eldest daughter bought everyone things, even though nobody was supposed to be exchanging.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
because
It-
nature abhors a vacuum, right?
Nature abhors it. That's exactly it. And I talk about that a lot in the book, this idea of all you have
Mhm.
to do is say no. Right. All you have to do is say no. And then during the weird extended silence where it becomes clear nobody wants to start doing the thing that you've
Yes.
stopped doing, even if it was truly necessary, even if it was
Mhm.
take Aunt Thelma to her doctor's appointments. It isn't like, wrap the presents in 35 ways. I'm not talking overachieving. I'm talking like a big thankless task that somebody has to
Mhm.
do. And you say, I'm not going to do it anymore. And then there's an extended, awkward silence during
Mhm.
which everything's rebooting. I have in the past said, I mean, I guess I can do it until somebody else can do it. I guess I can do it some days. Or
Yeah.
you take it back because that
Yes.
vacuum feels so strange and unfamiliar.
Yes. And it's funny, I have this 48-hour rule, 24 to 48-hour rule, where when you make you delegate something, you make a boundary. This is really from my first book, Boundary Boss, that no matter how much you want to take it back, you have to give yourself 24 to 48 hours of saying nothing. Just let it sit because you will not want to take it back. I promise you. Someone else will step up. Something else will happen. Because with my therapy clients, a lot of times, and a lot of what I was reading in this book reminded me so much of the many clients I've had over the last 3 decades, where there's just this feeling of like, it has to be me. It has to be me. And I would always say, listen, right now, let's think about this. This thing that you're saying, it must be you. If you were abducted by aliens right now, would your company close? They wouldn't. Would your family stop eating? They wouldn't, right? What would happen if you got abducted by aliens right now? The sun would still come up tomorrow. Your boss would delegate your shit to other people. Like, there's something about feeling like you are the center of the world, and in a lot of ways, we've organized our lives this way.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also something humbling and true about the fact that if we don't do it, someone else will at some point.
Or, you say, I'm not going to do it. It doesn't have to be me. That's a story. And then somebody says, you're the only one who can do
Yep.
this thing. Just because you set this boundary for yourself in your head doesn't mean that other people are going to stop making unreasonable asks of you,
Yes.
right? They're not going to
Absolutely.
magically find somebody new to hand everything off to. They're going to keep coming to you for a little while. And
Yes.
there are times like sick kid, sick parent, it does have to be you.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't always, but it's the over application, right?
Yes.
Well, I guess I'll just do Thanksgiving every year and mutter to myself, yeah, that has to be readdressed. It does.
Absolutely. All right. So in the book, the titles of the essays, I noticed they were all like super hyper positive, like look on the bright side, or it's never too late. So why did you use those sayings as titles?
So throughout my life, I felt like when I have asked for help or admitted that I was overwhelmed, I was usually given, instead of help, some kind of opportunity to fix myself or invitation to be better. And they're completely contradictory, right? I've gone over the decades from get a sense of humor, lighten up, look on the bright side, to like cherish every moment, all these kind of impossible assignments. And because I love an assignment, if I said like, oh my God, this college application process with my kid is impossible, and somebody says, oh, cherish every moment because you're going to be so sad when they're out of the house, that's not helpful. It's just like, oh, okay, now I also have to cherish every moment of this really difficult year.
Yes.
So the titles of each essay are these sort of, sometimes toxic positivity advice that was supremely unhelpful to the matter that's at hand in the essay.
Yes.
Like there's an essay called Never Give Up. And what the essay is about is me learning to ski as a 40 something with my children while my children like got it in 10 minutes. It was the most scared I've ever been in my life. And I hated it. And the eventual thing I learned was I could say, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yep.
And I wouldn't be letting my kids down or whatever that means. Like they don't care. So we don't ski that much. But when we do, like I'll stay by the fireplace. I'll see you guys later. Everybody's happy. That was the
Exactly.
completely soul freeing lesson that I got out of that experience when I thought it was going to be you just try harder and you go again and you go again and then you break through and then you're going to love it and then you'll be so glad you didn't give up, or you give yourself permission to give up.
Exactly. And not everything is for us.
Not everything is for us. Skiing
Like
is
it
not
just
for
can't
me.
be.
Yeah.
It's just, it can not be for you, and that can be fine.
Right.
I felt that way when I jumped out of a plane once, and people were like, "Oh my God." And I just did it because one of my sons was with me. It was at this event and he really wanted to do it. And I just really wanted to be cool and do it.
Right.
It was literally the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. And hashtag once is enough, man. Like never again.
Right.
Even if you were like, you can go for free, I'd be like, no,
No.
you couldn't pay me to go again. Like,
Yeah. Life is thrilling enough, I think.
I will agree. Part of what you talk about in the book too is that, or not that you talk about it, but it's sort of talking about productivity, right? Like there's all of this productivity advice out there in the ethos of like how we can be doing more and doing it more efficiently. But your take on it is that this advice is falling short for people who sort of do too much already, right? Right.
Right.
We're already with people with too much to do already, especially women. So how do we, why do you think this is, and how do you think we should sort of reframe it?
So much productivity advice traditionally is about getting better at doing more, either concentrating harder or working faster or doing the most important thing first, but taking on more. But as any person with a long list will tell you, the more efficiently you move through the list, the more likely it is there's just more stuff on your list. Oliver Burkeman talks about this in 4,000 Weeks, and I read his book while I was writing this book. And so I'm certainly indebted to his conclusion in that book, which is just, you just have to engage with, there are more things to do than you will have time to do them. Like once you need to accept your inability to do it all and then get a little more intentional about the things you are going to do. But so much of this advice is like, you're a bad person if you don't get up at 5 a.m., if you don't, do the 3-hour thing that's just for you, and don't look at your emails and don't do this. Right. Cold. Like it's right. It's so unpleasant, and you need to put yourself through these things. And a lot of it is just very self-centered. And yeah, I'd get a better, writing done in a cabin down the hill too, but I have kids and a dog that, is a little incontinent because she's old, and like that women in particularly, we have 100 small interruptions in our lives. Yes. And the productivity advice would tell you like, well, then you're not productive enough. You need to work harder at ignoring those things. You need to focus harder. And I think some of that advice is actually impossible when you have a kid with a peanut allergy, is the example I give in the book. You can't put your phone on do not disturb mode ever if you have a kid with a peanut allergy.
Correct.
You're not a bad person or not productive enough. That's your situation. And so in order to get done what you need to have done, all the productivity advice in the world won't help you with that spinning beach ball in the corner of your system that's always there.
Right. And also I chose that one because I feel the same way with the advice, and it's all set up to make you feel bad.
Right.
Like it's all set up to make you feel like you're not doing enough when we couldn't possibly be doing more. Like,
right.
Or according to the advice, we could be.
Right.
So I think that sort of finding our own way as to like, is it all about productivity? And for me, it's not. It's also really about presence. And that's been such a learning curve. I turned 60 last March. And I have to say, in the last 10 years, the presence, not just checking boxes, like really trying to be like working. I mean, I have a dedicated meditation practice and do different things, but how is your presence for you?
That's a good question, because, right now, amidst the book launch, social media is always very appealing, of course, right? It's designed that way. And right now it's like, oh, let me answer that one new, say thank you to the person who put up a story or whatever. That can feel like work, like you're accomplishing something. And I do think it's important to respond to the person who took the time to read your book and then reach out to you to say how much they liked it. I'm not saying that that's nonsense. It's very much not. But I could spend an 8-hour day going like beep, boop, boop, right? Whack-a-moling every email and feeling exhausted and like you got something done. But, truly creating a chapter or a relationship involves single-minded presence and putting the phone down. So I guess it's putting the phone down, or in this season of there is always something else I could be doing to make this book launch. It's a bottomless pit. Like, how do you promote a book? You just do everything you can, but it's okay to put the laptop away at 9:00 and relax before bed instead of working until I fall off the cliff. I'm trying to do some of that, even in this busy time.
Indeed. All right. I have one last question for you that I like to ask people because I'm obsessed with boundaries because that's my thing. So personally, what has been your most challenging boundary struggle and how did you overcome it if you have?
Think about this for a minute. Without giving too much detail, I have kids who have chronic health conditions and who take medication, and letting older kids, take over their own care as they get to a certain age is crucial. One of my kids took part in a study when they were 11, and the study was about how parents telling adolescents to take their medication makes them not want to take their medication. And this 11-year-old said, like, why would anybody not take their medicine if their mother told them to? And it was so sweet. And I laughed because I knew it was coming, right? You have to back off and let kids make their own choices. And of course, like, where they're going to go for spring break, I'm hands off on that stuff. Like, are you doing everything you can be doing to protect your health? That's really hard to not like peek around the corner about. And yet it is my assignment. And so to lovingly detach from something that was very much my job for a long time, has been a challenge and something I'm continuing to work on.
Amazing. I always say it's like, as mothers, we are tasked, fathers too, but mothers, with like keeping these little beings alive, right? All the things are your responsibility. Every single thing. Make sure they're warm enough. They can't talk, so you don't even know what's wrong, but they're crying about something, so figure it out. And then you get to the point where you're like, well, now you're smothering and now you're over mothering and now there's too much. You're like, wait a minute. When did we pivot? And of course, there is a point where we pivot. There is a point that makes sense where you're like, okay, slowly but surely, you've got the teen years where you have this opportunity to start stepping back some and teaching kids through the way you interact with them, deductive reasoning skills and all critical thinking, all these things. But no one talks that much about how friggin' hard it is to go from I'm fully responsible for every friggin' thing that happens to you to like, now I'm not, but I kind of still feel like I am.
Right. It's hard. And so give yourself grace. That's the only thing I can say that I hope readers of this book get, is that you deserve grace, that the things you're struggling with are hard and you're doing your best. And maybe the situation needs to be fixed. Maybe you don't need to be fixed. Maybe you just need to make a new choice.
Love it. All right. Tell everybody where we can find you and where we can find your beautiful book, Happy to Help.
Thank you, Terri. So, the book is called Happy to Help, Adventures of a People Pleaser. You can find it wherever you buy books. And my website is amywilson.com. And my parenting podcast is called What Fresh Hell.
Thank you so much for being on, Amy. I really enjoyed this talk.
Thank you, Terri.